Look at this. Really look at it. Your first instinct might be to turn away, to call it ugly, oppressive, or a monument to architectural arrogance. Most people do. But what if I told you that that's exactly the reaction it was designed to provoke? That within this controversial concrete giant lies one of architecture's most honest, most human experience. Brutalism. The word itself sounds harsh, unforgiving, and that's the first misconception. It doesn't come from brutal, it comes from béton brut, French for raw concrete. But the misunderstanding runs deeper than etymology. We've been taught to see these buildings as mistakes, as failure of urban planning that should be demolished and forgotten. We scroll past them, we complain about them, but we never ask the questions that matter. Why did brilliant architects across the world choose to build this way? Today we're going beyond the surface. We're going to explore what happens when you strip away architectural pretense and face the raw truth of structure itself. Because brutalism isn't about making you comfortable, it's about making you feel something real. And in our age of Instagram perfect facades and algorithmic beauty, maybe that's exactly what we need to see. Brutalism was born from the rubble of World War II, when entire cities lay in ruins and millions needed homes immediately. This wasn't architecture for luxury, it was architecture for survival. Governments across Europe and beyond faced an impossible equation, which was house everyone, do it quickly, and do it affordably. Traditional construction methods were too slow, too expensive, and too precious for a world that had just torn itself apart. Concrete offered a solution, which was raw, fast, and democratic. But this wasn't just pragmatic desperation. It was infused with genuine optimism, a belief that modern architecture could build a better, more equitable society. These buildings were meant to be monuments of social progress, physical manifestation of a world where decent housing was a right and not a privilege. The architects were creating eyesores. They were creating hope in material form. The father of this movement, whether he wanted the title or not, was Le Corbusier. His unit, d'habitation in Marseille, became the template that launched 1,000 concrete towers. Here was a complete vertical village, from apartments, shops, schools, and even a rooftop running track, all contained within one structural mass of béton brut, which was raw concrete left exposed and unfinished. Le Corbusier called concrete the most malleable of materials and insisted on showing it honestly, celebrating its rough texture and the imprints of wooden formwork. This wasn't carelessness, it was radical transparency. The building wasn't hiding what it was made of behind marble veneers or decorative flourishes. It was exactly what it appeared to be, nothing more and nothing less. This honesty became brutalism's philosophical core. For centuries, architecture had disguised structure beneath ornaments, which ranged from columns that served no purpose, facades that pretended to be stone when they were brick, decorations applied like makeup to hide the truth beneath. Brutalists rejected all of it. Function determined form. If a building needed massive concrete supports, those supports became their aesthetic. If services like elevators and plumbing could be expressed externally, why hide them inside? This was architecture as truth-telling, stripped of pretense and aristocratic excess. The utopian vision was simple but profound. If we build honestly, if we prioritize human needs over decorative status symbols, we could create spaces that elevated everyone, not just the wealthy. The raw concrete wasn't ugly, it was egalitarian. It cost the same whether you were building for the rich or the poor, and it aged the same way for everyone. In a world still recovering from the ultimate failure of civilization, that kind of architectural democracy felt like revolution. Brutalist buildings don't whisper, they shout. The visual language is unmistakable. Massive geometric forms that seem to defy gravity, surfaces of raw concrete bearing the honest scars of their construction, repetitive modular patterns that create rhythm through pure structure rather than applied decoration. These buildings reject every conventional attempt to make architecture friendly or familiar. There are no columns pretending to be Greek temples, no ornate cornices or decorative flourishes to soften the impact. What you see is load-bearing truth, concrete doing exactly what concrete does, holding up enormous weight while expressing that effort in every textured surface. The modularity isn't monotony, it's a kind of industrial poetry where repeated windows or structural bays create patterns as deliberate as any carved stone relief. This aesthetic makes a building impossible to ignore, which was precisely the point. Brutalism demands that you acknowledge it, that you reckon with the physical reality of architecture rather than glide past it comfortably. The psychological effect is complex and deeply personal. Stand before a massive brutalist structure and you'll feel something visceral, perhaps awe and the sheer ambition of suspending hundreds of tons of concrete in geometric defiance of nature. Perhaps intimidation, a sense of being dwarfed by something monumental and unmoved by human scale. For some, it's alienation, a feeling that these buildings were designed for abstract ideals rather than flesh and blood people who craved warmth and texture. The scale deliberately overwhelms, asserting that collective human achievement, which is bigger than any individual. This can feel empowering or oppressive, depending on your relationship with institutions and authority. The starkness strips away conforming illusion, presenting architecture as it truly is, which is heavy, permanent, and uncompromising. There is no decorative reassurance that the building cares about you personally. It simply exists, fulfilling its function with brutal honesty, and you must decide how to feel about that. Yet within this singular aesthetic, extraordinary diversities emerge. Boston City Hall rises like a concrete fortress, its massive overhangs creating dramatic shadows that emphasize governmental weight and authority. The Barbican estate in London transforms the same visual vocabulary into an almost utopian residential complex, where brutalist towers surround gardens and waterways, proving the style could create community rather than destroy it. University campuses like UC San Diego's Geisel Library took the aesthetic skyward, creating sculptural forms that celebrate intellectual aspiration through pure geometry. The different contexts, whether it being civic, residential, or educational, reveal that brutalism was never a monolithic style, but an architectural philosophy adaptable to human needs. A brutalist library and a brutalist housing project share the same commitment to exposed concrete and bold form, but one reaches upward with optimistic geometry while the other spreads horizontally to create density with dignity. The core identity remains, which is honesty, massiveness, and functionality, but the expression changes to serve the people who would actually inhabit these controversial spaces. The ugliness is a lie we've told ourselves so often, we've forgotten to look with fresh eyes. Step back and actually observe the geometric artistry at play. These aren't shapeless concrete boxes, they are carefully composed sculptures at architectural scale. Watch how light moves from a brutalist facade throughout the day, how those deep-set windows create dramatic shadows that shift and transform the building's character from dawn to dusk. Notice the unexpected elegance in a cantilevered overhang that seems to float despite its massive weight, or the rhythmic precision of modular balconies, creating patterns as intricate as any decorative facade. Brutalism at its best is a three-dimensional art you can walk through and inhabit. The concrete itself becomes a canvas for texture. Board-formed surfaces hold the memory of wooden grain. Bush-hammered finishes create tactile landscapes, and withering adds unplanned patina that tells the story of decades. The people who actually live and work in these buildings often tell a different story than the critics who judge from photographs. Residents of London Trellick Tower, once revealed as a symbol of urban decay, now fiercely defend their homes, not despite the brutalist design, but because of it. They speak of generous room size, unexpected privacy created by the tower's separation from surrounding buildings, and shared spaces that actually fostered community rather than isolation. Preservationist Henrietta Billings notes that many condemned brutalist structures were actually maintenance failures, not design failures. Concrete needs care like any material, and decades of neglect creates the decay we now blame on the architecture itself. The texture changes when you hear from someone who studied in a brutalist library, who found fortress like solidity comforting rather than oppressive, or who raised children in a social housing that gave them stability and dignity. This is the context we've erased. Brutalism was conceived as architecture for the public good. These weren't monuments to corporate power or personal wealth. They were libraries where anyone could read for free, universities designed to educate the masses, housing projects meant to guarantee that every family had a decent home regardless of income. The communal purpose was baked into the design. Ground floors opened to public plazas, rooftop gardens were shared spaces, interior streets created weather-protected gathering areas. The architecture wasn't imposing for its own sake. It was monumental because it represented collective investment in collective welfare. When we call a brutalist housing estate ugly, we often relay saying we don't believe poor people deserve architectural ambition. When we tear down a brutalist library, we're demolishing not just concrete, but a physical embodiment of the belief that society should provide beautiful, functional public spaces for everyone. The social function was inseparable from the aesthetics. The raw honesty was the materials matched the democratic honesty of the intention. This building said, "This is for all of us," built without pretense or hierarchy, designed to elevate the common good. That vision failed in many cases, undermined by poor maintenance, social neglect, and changing political priorities. But the failure wasn't in the concrete, it was in our commitment to the ideals the concrete was meant to serve. Thank you for watching. Until the next one.